My adopted daughter, Elise, said during her wedding party while addressing me, "You are not my biological father, so you can sit with the children." Everyone laughed and made fun of me. Then she added, "You definitely don't have the genes to produce a face like this." I smiled and walked away. What happened next was quite unexpected. I used to believe that love, genuine, patient, constant love, could fill any void, that it could compensate for biology, bridge invisible gaps, and one day become as sacred as blood. That belief sustained me for over 2 decades. It got me out of bed at 5 a.m. on school days to pack her lunch and leave sticky notes in her backpack with terrible jokes just to see her half smile. It made me learn to braid hair and attend parent-teacher conferences alone when my wife traveled for work. It was that belief, perhaps naive, that made me say yes when my wife suggested adoption after our 4th failed IVF cycle. We were exhausted, more emotionally, she more physically. She couldn't bear another round of hormones, and I couldn't bear to watch her break down month after month. So when she said, "Maybe there's a child out there waiting for us," I wanted to believe she was right. Her name was Elise. She was 6 when we met her. Small, sharp-eyed, and cautious. She didn't smile much at the foster home, just clung to a worn-out stuffed rabbit and watched everything as if expecting someone to let her down. I remember thinking, she's going to be a challenge, but something in her reminds me of the quiet parts of myself. When we brought her home, she was wary. She kept her bags packed by the door for the first month. She didn't call us mom or dad. She ate in silence and slept with a light on, but I was patient. I thought time was love, and love was time, and that eventually, she would see we weren't going anywhere. On her 10th birthday, she called my wife Mom. She said it casually, as if it had always been there, but with me, she stuck to Mr. Grant until she was 12. Then it became just Grant, which felt like a downgrade from not dad to coworker. Still, I told myself it was fine. I was the one who took her to soccer games, who waited in the car after dance practice, who made her grilled cheese sandwiches without the crusts. The whole 9 yards. I even stayed up with her during her high school all-nighters, bringing her hot chocolate and moral support as she studied for exams. We connected over old movies. She liked black and white films, which surprised me for a teenager. I thought those little rituals were our own language, her quiet way of saying thank you. But there were small signs, like landmines buried just beneath the surface. When people asked, "Is that your dad?" she would sometimes reply, "He's my adoptive father, never just dad." Once, she joked to a friend on speakerphone that she was lucky she didn't inherit my nose. I laughed, but it hurt. I always hoped the warmth would come with the years, that maybe when she was older, she'd stop seeing me as the man who filled a spot and more as the father who actually showed up. Still, I invested everything I had in her emotionally, financially, spiritually. I brought her into my company as an intern when she turned 18. I taught her the ropes and had her shadow my executive meetings. By 22, she became the youngest department head in the firm's history. People said I was playing favorites. Maybe it was true, but I believed in her. I thought preparing her to take over one day wasn't just good for the company, but a way to show her she belonged, that this wasn't just business, it was legacy. My wife, Denise, was proud on the surface. She bragged about Elise's achievements to her friends and posted carefully curated family photos with captions like, "Couldn't be prouder of our girl." But behind closed doors, she had a way of deflecting anything too emotional. If I hinted that Elise still seemed distant with me, Denise would reply, "She's just not expressive. Don't take it personally." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe this was all still heading towards an emotional payoff, that all the love I'd poured in would one day come back, even in a small wire gesture, a Father's Day card, a spontaneous hug. Something. When Elise told us she was engaged, I tried to act thrilled. I even helped finance part of the wedding. The groom, Mako, seemed nice enough, though a bit weak-willed. He laughed too hard at Elise's jokes, the kind of laughter that says, "Please, like me." But he made her smile, and that was enough for me. I thought the wedding would be our big full-circle moment. I pictured Elise at the altar giving a speech, maybe even thanking us. Thanking me. The night before the wedding, I sat on the hotel balcony with a glass of whiskey, looking out at the city lights. I felt a mix of hope and fear. I always carried that mix when it came to her. I had written a little toast. Nothing dramatic, just something heartfelt. I even practiced it in front of the mirror like an idiot. I didn't sleep much. I was busy imagining how she might finally say something kind, something that would make all the years worthwhile. I didn't know that in less than 24 hours, that same girl, whom I had dressed every morning for school, driven to dance, defended from bullies, and practically handed a company to, would stand in front of 100 guests and publicly declare that I was nothing more than the guy who didn't father her, and that everyone would laugh. I remember standing at the back of the room, holding my champagne flute like a life raft, as Elise tapped her glass with a fork to get everyone's attention at the microphone. Her white dress shimmered under the chandelier, and her smile, so practiced and elegant, radiated a confidence that made her seem older than her 26 years. I watched her, trying to calm the hope pounding in my chest. This is it, I told myself. Today, she'll see me as her father. She started with Mako. Her tone was sweet and loving. My rock, she called him, which made me chuckle, considering she still called me to check her tires or fix her printer. Then she thanked her mother. She spoke of Denise's strength, her guidance, her authenticity. There was applause, and then her eyes found me across the room. She paused just long enough for the anticipation to build in my chest. I smiled softly, already rehearsing the little nod I would give when people clapped. I even raised my glass a little, ready to receive the toast I thought I had earned. And then she said it. And to Grant, she dragged out my name like it was a punchline. You're not my biological father, so I think it's only fair you sit at the kids' table tonight. The laughter erupted. Deep, real belly laughs. Her friends doubled over. Some guests looked around, uncomfortable but amused. Even Mako chuckled under his breath. I felt the corners of my own smile tremble. Not because I found it funny, but because I was trained. Trained not to make anyone uncomfortable, to never show my hurt in public. I smiled as if I were in on the joke, but inside, something snapped clean, sudden, and irreversible. She wasn't finished. You definitely don't have the genes to produce a face like this, she added, tossing her hair back. Sorry, but someone had to say it. Another, louder round of laughter. Someone even clapped behind me. Someone else muttered, ouch, but even that sounded amused. Denise just laughed, covering her mouth as if it were all a harmless joke. I looked at her, searching for any sign of discomfort, any indication she would step in, but there was nothing, just that performative laughter that says, don't ruin the mood. I stood there for another moment, my face frozen in that polite expression, my champagne untouched. Then I turned and walked to the lobby. No one followed me. No one called my name. I sat on a bench outside the ballroom next to a fake potted plant, listening to the muffled sound of the party continuing without me. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there, stunned, as something inside me settled, like the last piece of a puzzle I had taken 20 years to complete. That night, I lay awake in the hotel room, staring at the ceiling. Denise came in after midnight, heels in hand, her eyes glassy from wine. She didn't ask where I had been or how I was feeling. She just said Elise was nervous, that jokes helped her cope. I watched her lay her dress over the chair and realized we weren't on the same side of anything anymore. That hurt as much as Elise's words. Maybe more. Because if anyone should have understood what that moment meant, it was the woman who had convinced me to become a father. I think I'll leave in the morning, I said quietly. Denise didn't answer, just got into bed and turned her back to me. Her silence was an answer in itself. The next morning, while the rest of the party was dealing with hangovers and uploading photos, I packed my bag, left before dawn, and drove straight to the office. I didn't stop for coffee, didn't turn on the radio, just drove in silence, listening to the hum of the tires on the road. I arrived just as the sky was turning that pale, early morning blue, the kind of color that makes everything seem a little too honest. I unlocked my office, turned on my computer, and pulled up the employee directory. Her name was there, Elise M. Harrow, Director of Strategy. I stared at it for a long minute, my hand hovering over the mouse. My stomach churned, not with doubt, but with a sense of finality. I clicked Terminate Access, and then opened a message to HR with instructions to remove her from the payroll and cancel her company benefits immediately. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even punishment. It was about alignment, about finally aligning my actions with what I had always known deep down. She didn't see me as her father. She never had. And maybe that was okay, but she couldn't have it both ways. Not the legacy, not the title, not the resources, without the respect. By the time my assistant arrived at 9, it was done. Elise called my cell 3 hours later. I let it go to voicemail. Then again, and again. On the 4th try, I answered. "Grant," she said, her voice tight, almost panicked. "What the hell is going on?" "I assume you've been notified," I replied calmly. "You fired me? Seriously? After everything I've done for this company?" I took a deep breath. "You made a choice yesterday, Elise. You reminded the world that I'm not your father. I'm just honoring that." "It was a joke," she snapped. "Jesus. Are you really that sensitive?" "It was my wedding." "No," I replied. "It was your moment. And you used it to humiliate me." There was silence on the line. "You are overreacting so much," she finally said. "I raised you, I loved you, I protected you, and you made a mockery of me in front of everyone. You don't get to walk that back just because there are finally consequences." Then she started to cry. That broken, heaving sob that used to gut me. But not this time. This time, I listened and felt nothing. Not hate, not rage, just a quiet, firm emptiness. "I'll figure it out," she muttered at the end. "You're going to regret this." But I knew I wouldn't. Because for the first time, I wasn't trying to be someone's father. I was just trying to be a man who could look himself in the mirror and say, "You don't have to keep begging to be wanted." That day, I didn't go home. Nor the next. I booked a room at a quiet business hotel not far from the office. Just a clean bed, hot coffee in the lobby, and a kind of silence that demanded nothing from me. I had lived most of my adult life orbiting others, especially Elise. So much of my identity had been built on being reliable, being present, being the man who showed up even when no one asked him to. But that morning, when I hit send on the final HR form and watched her employee profile vanish from our internal systems, I felt a strange, almost surgical lightness, as if something had been excised from me. Not with pain, but with a numb clarity I hadn't expected. I wasn't euphoric, I wasn't victorious, I was just unburdened. Around lunchtime, the receptionist buzzed my office to say Elise had shown up downstairs. I didn't answer. I just stared out the window, watching the cars pass on the street below, each one carrying people with their own stories, their own hurts, their own weddings gone wrong. I let the call go to voicemail. 5 minutes later, she texted. "Please, can we talk?" I didn't reply. 10 minutes later, "I didn't mean to hurt you. It was a stupid joke." Then, "You can't think this is fair." The word fair stuck with me. It rattled around inside my head like a loose screw in an empty drawer. What had been fair about raising someone else's daughter and still being treated like a stranger? I agreed to meet her in the parking garage, not inside the office. There was no more room for personal drama there. When I got down, she was pacing, phone in one hand, a disposable coffee cup in the other. Her makeup was half done, her hair frizzy. She looked like she hadn't slept. For an instant, something in me stirred. But then I remembered the way she tilted her head, twisted her lip, and delivered that line as if she had been saving it just to hurt me. That image snuffed out any flicker of tenderness. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice small. I nodded, not speaking. She took it as permission to continue. I was nervous. There were so many people looking at me, and I wanted to be funny, you know. Lighten the mood. I didn't mean for it to sound so harsh. You didn't mean it, I repeated quietly. You rehearsed it. No, Grant. Dad. Please. I messed up. Okay. I see that now. I held up a hand, cutting her off mid-plea. No. Don't call me that now. You don't get to use that word only when it's convenient. Her eyes welled up immediately. I didn't mean it like that. But that's how it sounded, I replied, calmer than I felt. And that's how the entire room understood it. You were finally on a stage, and you showed the world exactly what I'm worth to you. It was a joke, she repeated, almost desperate. I took a step back. If it was a joke, then let me be clear, I'm not laughing. I gave you 20 years, I continued. Not for applause, not for acknowledgement. I did it because I believed you deserved a father, and I thought that in time, maybe you'd see me as one. She opened her mouth to say something but closed it. For once, she was speechless. I taught you how to swim. I sat with you through the flu. I walked you through your first heartbreak. I paid for your degree. And you repaid me by seating me with the children and mocking my DNA. I was drunk. No, I replied firmly. You were honest. Drunk or not, people don't say things they don't feel when the spotlight is on. Her face twisted with a mix of guilt and shame, or maybe just the raw awareness that her tears weren't working this time. She set the coffee cup down on the curb and looked at me with eyes stripped of entitlement. For the first time. So what now? She whispered. You're just going to cut me off. I'm letting you go, I replied. Professionally, emotionally. You made your position clear. Now I'm making mine. I can't believe you're doing this, she suddenly snapped, anger flaring. You raised me. And now you're throwing me away because of one hurt feeling? I looked at her, really looked at her. That spark in her voice, the same tone she used in meetings when someone challenged her, the same edge she inherited from her mother. And for the first time, I didn't feel pride. I felt distance. A vast, cold distance. I didn't throw you away, I said. You threw me away. In a room full of strangers. She watched me, trembling, but she didn't apologize again. I think she understood there was nothing left to say. She wiped her cheek, turned, and walked back to her car. As she drove away, I didn't follow her taillights. I turned and went back into the building. The air in the lobby was cool, impersonal, just the way I liked it. I went to my office, sat at my desk, and pulled up the project she had been managing before everything fell apart. There were missing pieces, files she had saved only to her personal account, but I didn't panic. I called another team lead, told him I'd handle the transition, and just like that, the work went on. That afternoon, Denise called. I let it ring the first time. Then guilt pricked at me. I figured I owed her a conversation, however brief. When I answered, she wasted no time. Elise told me what you did. I figured, I replied. She's humiliated, Grant. Good, I said, sharper than I intended. Silence. Did you think I was just going to let it go? I asked. Did you hear what she said? She was nervous, she replied. She was just trying to be funny. I laughed, a dry, hollow sound. Do you hear yourself? If anyone else said that to me in public, you would have been furious in my defense. She's our daughter, she said. No, I corrected. She's your daughter. You always made that distinction. I just didn't want to see it. That silence was heavier than any before. I think we need to talk, she said. I think we're past that, I replied. And for the first time in years, it was true. The house felt different when I finally returned. Not because anything had physically changed, but because I had. The walls that once held the echo of quiet scenes and occasional laughter from the living room now resonated with an emotional sterility I hadn't noticed before. I walked in like a visitor, not a husband coming home. Denise was in the kitchen, her back to me, stirring something that smelled of garlic and cream, her go-to-comfort food. I set my bag down quietly, waiting for her to turn around, but she didn't. Dinner's almost ready, she said, as if she hadn't just watched everything shatter 4 days ago in front of over 100 people. I didn't answer right away. I walked to the bar cart, poured myself a drink, and sat at the table where we once planned Elisa's adoption papers. I looked at the grain of the wood, the small, circular stain left by a wine glass I'd knocked over years ago during one of our rare arguments. We had laughed about it then, said we'd get the table refinished, but we never did. Now it seemed symbolic, flawed, forgotten, but still standing. Did you talk to her? Denise finally asked, turning around. Her tone was neutral, but her eyes weren't. Yes, I said. She pleaded, then she blamed, then she cried, and then she left. Denise sighed, a mix of relief and irritation. She's not handling this well. Neither am I replied. She sat across from me, placing a napkin down as if we were about to negotiate terms. You cut her off, Grant. You humiliated her. I gave a short, involuntary laugh. I humiliated her. At least I waited until we were in private. She did it in a crowded room. She was just trying to be funny. She was trying to be cruel, I said, my voice low and firm. And you laughed. That made her flinch, just a tiny, almost imperceptible gesture. It caught me off guard. So you laughed, I said. What did you want me to do? She snapped, annoyed. Stand up and make a scene at our daughter's wedding? I wanted you to look hurt. I wanted you to say something. I wanted you to care that the man who raised her was being publicly demoted to a worn-out, spare part. Denise's lips tightened. She looked away, blinking hard. She didn't mean it like that. Yes, she did, I replied. And so did you. Her eyes shot back to me, narrowed. What is that supposed to mean? It means you always kept a distance, I said. From me, from the reality of our family. You were the one who wanted to adopt, remember? I was the one who hesitated. I was the one who said, what if we're not enough? And you said, love is enough. But when it came down to it, you always made it clear who the real parent was. That's not fair, she whispered. Neither was 20 years of pouring my soul into someone who still sees me as disposable, I shot back. And watching the one person who should have been on my side choose silence. She leaned back, crossing her arms. So what now? You're the victim, and we're all the villains in your grand moral play. No, I said. I'm just done pretending this marriage is still built on mutual respect. The silence that followed wasn't surprising. We had been walking toward this for years, even if I wouldn't admit it until now. She didn't cry. I didn't either. We just stared at each other, two strangers who once shared a dream of family and ended up building a monument to everything that can go wrong when love isn't backed by truth. I want a divorce, I said calmly. Denise didn't speak. She blinked once, then again, as if waiting for a punchline. When none came, she stood up, walked to the sink, and turned off the stove. The smell of garlic stopped filling the air, and the pot sat there, unfinished, like a metaphor too obvious to ignore. I see, she said quietly. So that's it. That's it. She's an adult. She can live her own life. Denise looked down at her hands, then back at me. You know she's never going to forgive you for this. I'm not asking her to. She shook her head, more disappointed than angry. You're colder than I thought. No, I replied. I'm just finally warm enough for myself. The next few weeks were a blur of paperwork, lawyers, and the dividing of assets. Quiet nights packing boxes and listening to the sound of tape being ripped from a roll. Elise didn't call again, and I didn't reach out. Denise moved into a condo on the other side of town. We split everything down the middle. There were no shouting matches, no broken plates, no dramatic exits. Just two people separating because the foundation they built had crumbled under years of unspoken tension. It wasn't until I was completely alone, keys in hand, stepping into a freshly painted apartment with a view of the river, that the reality of it hit me. I was free. Not lonely, not grieving. Free. I didn't owe anyone an explanation anymore. I didn't have to smile through pain. I didn't have to beg for a title I had earned 10,000 times over in quiet, sleepless nights. And that freedom, as quiet as it was, felt like redemption. Starting over at 53 wasn't a blank slate, it was more like trying to paint over a wall steeped in too much history. Every time I passed a father and daughter at a coffee shop or saw wedding photos online, something inside me would tense up, not with regret, but with that lingering ghost of what could have been. I didn't miss Elise. I missed the version of her I thought would one day appear. I missed the fantasy, the dream of being seen as a father, not just a stand-in, a caretaker, a legal benefactor. But dreams, I learned, are dangerous when you hold on too tight. They start to rot. So I let mine go. I let the idea of a reconciliation die quietly, with no ceremony, no funeral. It didn't deserve one. What I did deserve was closure. And closure came in the form of choosing something, someone, entirely new. Her name was Belle. We met in a bookstore, of all things, both reaching for the same copy of East of Eden. She laughed first and said, "You take it. I already know how it ends." The moment didn't feel momentous, but I remembered her voice all night, soft, a little raspy, like someone who smoked in their youth but gave it up for something better. When we ran into each other again 2 weeks later at the farmer's market, it didn't feel like fate, it felt like an invitation. She asked if I wanted to share a bag of kettle corn, and I said yes. I hadn't done something spontaneous in years. Our relationship didn't explode in fireworks. It arrived like spring, quiet, slow, and certain. And for the first time in decades, I felt like I wasn't auditioning for anyone's approval, I could just be. Belle knew about Elise from the beginning. I told her everything over a Thai food dinner with red wine. I didn't try to sugarcoat it. I told her about the wedding speech, the laughter, the betrayal, and the slow unraveling of a marriage that was already worn thin. She listened without flinching. When I was done, she just said, "That must have felt like dying while everyone watched." And in that instant, I felt seen. Not judged, not analyzed, just seen. She didn't offer advice, didn't suggest I try to fix anything, she just took my hand across the table and squeezed it, as if she understood something words couldn't reach. We got married a year later in a small Gardeno microphones, no fancy speeches, no spotlight. Just us, a few close friends, and the kind of peace that doesn't demand attention. I didn't invite Denise, didn't tell Elise. That life was another country, one I had emigrated from. I didn't burn the bridge, I just stopped crossing it. And when Belle and I found out we were expecting a child, panic didn't wash over me like I thought it would. I felt something I hadn't felt in years, hope. Real, sturdy, cautious hope. The kind you don't place on someone else's shoulders but carry in your own chest. When our son was born, I held him with a reverence born from understanding what it means to lose love. He was so small, so quiet, and yet, in that tiny, squirming body, I felt more connection than I had in years of forced fatherhood. It wasn't about blood. It was the way he looked at me, as if I were all he knew, no resentment, no barriers, no history. Just trust. I whispered his name, Caleb, into his ear, the way I had always wanted someone to whisper mine, with tenderness, with truth, with an open heart. And in that moment, I felt the dam inside me break. Not from sorrow, but from gratitude. I had been given a second chance, and this time, it wasn't tied to obligation. It was born from love that didn't need to prove itself. A few months after Caleb was born, I saw Elise again. Not by choice. I was at a conference downtown for a meeting, and there she was, walking out of a nearby auditorium in a crisp navy suit, hair pulled back as if she were trying too hard to look composed. Our eyes met. For a second, neither of us moved. Then she crossed the space between us and said my name. Grant. I nodded. There was a long pause. She glanced down at the baby carrier in my hand. Caleb was asleep, his face soft and oblivious to the emotional landmine just above him. He's beautiful, she said, almost wistfully. Thanks. She crossed her arms, then uncrossed them. I heard you got remarried. I did. Another pause. I was angry for a long time, she admitted. At you. At Mom. At myself, I guess. She paused. I thought you'd call someday. I didn't think it was my place to, I said. She nodded, biting her lip. I was immature. What I said at the wedding. It wasn't right. No, I replied. It wasn't. She didn't cry this time. She didn't beg for forgiveness. She just stood there, looking at me like someone trying to read a language they once knew but hadn't practiced in years. I'm working now, she said, almost defensively. I have a new job. Another firm. I'm glad. I guess I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I nodded again. Not out of obligation or softness, just as an acknowledgement. The kind you give a stranger who once knew your face. I wish you the best, Elise, I told her. Then I turned and walked away. There's a specific kind of quiet that comes after years of noise. A quiet that doesn't echo with what-ifs or regrets, but with a soft, dignified knowing. That's the space I live in now. My mornings start slow. Coffee by the window, Caleb babbling in his high chair, Belle humming a tune from the other room. There's no tension hiding behind every moment. No need to interpret silences or decipher what's not being said. Just the calm certainty of a life I built deliberately, not out of duty, not out of pressure, but out of choice. Some days, when the air is particularly still and golden, I sit and think about the man I used to be. The man who waited 20 years for a love that never arrived in the form he expected. I don't pity him, but I don't envy him either. He did what he thought was right. He gave everything he had. But somewhere along the way, he forgot that he deserved something in return. The funny thing about letting go is that people assume it's a dramatic farewell, a slammed door, a burned photograph. But for me, letting go was a slow decision, made day after day. It happened when I stopped checking my phone for missed calls. When I deleted old voicemails, including one from Elise that had sat in my inbox for over a year. Hey, it's me. I know you're still mad. I just wanted to say sorry again. I must have played it a dozen times before I finally hit delete. That wasn't cruelty, it was clarity. I had finally reached a place where I didn't need the apology to mean anything. I didn't need her guilt to validate my pain. I had already honored it, lived through it, felt every sharp edge of it, and now, I had stopped bleeding from it. Sometimes Belle asks if I think Elise will ever reach out again. Maybe when she has a child, she'll say. Maybe then she'll understand what it means to give without expectation. Maybe then she'll recognize the difference between biology and loyalty. I tell her maybe, but I don't hold space for it in my heart anymore. I've rearranged the furniture of my soul to make room for what's real. Caleb's laugh when I tickle his stomach, the way Belle slips her hand into mine when we walk by the river. The small joys that don't ask me to prove I'm worthy. I used to measure my worth by how much I could endure. Now, I measure it by how much peace I can maintain. People don't talk enough about the cost of not being chosen, about what it does to your spirit when the people you invest in treat you like an understudy. I spent years trying to earn a seat at a table I had built with my own hands. And in the end, they made it clear I was never really invited. But instead of fighting for the scraps, I built a new table smaller, quieter, but honest. And every person who sits at it knows they're there because I chose them, and they chose me back. There is no greater freedom than that. A few months ago, I saw a picture of Qley's online. A mutual acquaintance had posted it from some business awards gala. She was on a stage, holding a plaque, smiling that same smile that once fooled me into believing I mattered more than I did. I didn't feel anger, just distance, like looking at an old school photo, recognizable, but far away. I showed it to Belle, and she just nodded. "She looks like she's doing well," she said. I agreed, and we moved on. That's what healing really is. Not the absence of memory, but the absence of pain. Denise never reached out after the divorce was finalized. A few documents were sent, a few signatures, nothing more. I heard through a friend that she moved into a smaller place and took up pottery. I hope she finds whatever it is she's looking for. For a long time, I blamed her more than Qley's. After all, she was the one who promised we would raise a child together. She was the one who said love could fill the gaps. But I've learned that people often sell you the love they wish someone had given them. And when they realize they can't provide it either, they crumble. Denise didn't fail me out of malice, she failed me out of silence. That kind of betrayal takes longer to heal, but it leaves less of a scar in the end. I'm not going to pretend I have it all figured out. There are still nights I wake up thinking I heard someone call me Dad, only to realize it was a dream. There are still holidays that feel off balance, like something is missing. But then Caleb will climb into my lap with his toy dinosaur and say, again, after I make it roar, and the emptiness shrinks. The pain doesn't disappear. It just gets outnumbered by the good. Sometimes people ask if I'll ever tell Caleb about Qley's, about that part of my life. And I always say the same thing: when he's old enough to understand the complexities of love, I'll tell him everything. Not to burden him, but to show him that love isn't always returned, and that's not a reflection of our worth. It's just a truth of life. I want him to know that boundaries aren't cruel, that sometimes the bravest thing a man can do is walk away from people who won't choose him even if he raised them, even if he loved them more than they'll ever know. I look at my son now, and I think, I finally chose myself. I finally stopped bleeding for people who sharpened the knife. I divorced a woman who prioritized appearances over loyalty. I let go of a daughter who couldn't see the man behind the title. And in their place, I built something honest, something whole, something mine. If there's one thing I've learned from all of this, it's that love given freely is never wasted. But that doesn't mean you have to keep giving it to people who mock it. Sometimes you have to close the door, not out of spite, but to keep your soul from freezing in the cold draft they left behind. And when you do, don't look back. The life in front of you deserves to be seen with both eyes open.